The stars outside the UES Defiance viewport looked different today. Captain Miranda Chen knew this feeling. A subtle wrongness that crawled along the edges of perception, invisible to most but impossible to ignore for someone like her. Her cybernetic eye flickered, its quantum mesh neural interface parsing data streams that conventional sensors would have missed entirely. A tiny anomaly. A microscopic deviation in the quantum background radiation. Most would have dismissed it as nothing, but Miranda Chen was not most people. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," she called, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made her junior officers snap to immediate attention. "Run a full spectral analysis on the Sigma outreach quadrant. Something's off." Kai Rodriguez, the ship's chief engineer, didn't question her. Years of service together had taught him that Chen's hunches were more reliable than most confirmed intelligence reports. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, layers of quantum algorithms peeling back the darkness of space like digital curtains. The Defiant was no ordinary patrol vessel, an experimental prototype that pushed the boundaries of human technological innovation. It was a ship that existed in the gray area between military hardware and pure scientific marvel. Cutting-edge adaptive systems hummed beneath its sleek exterior, systems so advanced that most of the crew didn't fully understand their capabilities. Miranda's cybernetic eye was a testament to that same innovative spirit. Earned during the brutal Proxima conflict, the implant was more than just a replacement for an eye lost in battle. It was a quantum-linked sensory array that could detect variations in space-time that would be invisible to any standard biological or mechanical sensor. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice cut through her thoughts, "I'm seeing multiple quantum signature disruptions. They're not natural." Before she could respond, the ship's experimental AI, nicknamed ARIA by the crew, spoke in its eerily calm synthesized voice. "Detecting multiple warp signatures emerging from subspace. Preliminary analysis suggests unknown configuration. Threat assessment. Critical." The bridge went silent. Every crew member knew what that tone meant. Miranda's remaining organic eye narrowed. The Sigma outreach was supposed to be a dead zone. No strategic value. No known alien traffic. Just endless, empty space punctuated by the occasional asteroid and long-abandoned mining outpost, which made the emerging warp signatures absolutely terrifying. "Full sensor sweep," she ordered. "I want every piece of data this ship can collect. ARIA, begin quantum encryption of all logs. If we don't survive this, someone needs to know what happened." The ship's systems responded instantly. Sensor arrays that looked more like intricate crystalline structures than traditional technology began to pulse with an otherworldly light. Adaptive hull plating shifted and reconfigured, preparing for potential combat before any traditional weapon system could even begin to calculate a response. Rodriguez's hands were a blur across the sensor controls. Multiple contacts. Their configuration doesn't match any known species in our database. They're big. Really big. Miranda felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not fear. Something closer to anticipation. A predator's awareness, honed through years of conflict and survival. "Show me," she said. The main view screen erupted with a holographic representation of the emerging threat. Massive vessels materialized from subspace, their geometry defying conventional understanding of spacecraft design. They weren't just ships. They were something else entirely. A communication burst suddenly pierced their systems. Not a standard transmission, but a data packet so complex it would take most computers days to begin decrypting. ARIA processed it in milliseconds. Preliminary translation complete. The AI reported. Message content suggests complete destruction of 3 outer human colonies. Transmission time. Approximately 37 minutes ago. 37 minutes. 37 minutes during which 3 entire human colonies have been wiped from existence, and no one knew except the crew of the UES Defiant. Miranda Chen's cybernetic eye pulsed with a cold, electric blue light. First contact was about to begin, and humanity didn't even know it was happening. The first volley came faster than anyone expected. Massive energy signatures erupted around the Defiant, space itself seeming to warp and buckle under the alien weaponry. Lieutenant Kai Rodriguez was already moving before the first alarm could sound, his hands a blur of motion across the engineering consoles. "Area," he barked. "Begin adaptive reconfiguration protocol, Omega-9. The ship's AI responded instantaneously. Adaptive hull plating began to shift, molecular structures realigning in patterns that defied conventional physics. What had been solid metal moments before became a dynamic, living membrane capable of absorbing and redistributing massive energy impacts. Rodriguez knew they had mere seconds. The alien weapons were unlike anything in human military databases, not just powerful, but fundamentally different. Where human technology relied on predictable energy transfer and mechanical systems, these weapons seemed to manipulate the very fabric of space-time. "Captain," he called out, "I'm going to need to cannibalize the quantum navigation array to boost our defensive capabilities." Miranda Chen's voice cut through the growing chaos. "Do it. We're beyond standard operating procedures now." The ship groaned, not a mechanical sound, but something more organic. The Defiant was more than just a vessel. It was a living system, pushing itself beyond designed limitations. Ensign Alina Martinez, the ship's young quantum systems specialist, was already tearing apart a secondary control panel. Her hands moved with a combination of surgical precision and desperate creativity. Traditional military training went out the window. This was survival. "Rodriguez," she shouted, "I found a resonance frequency in their weapon signature. If we can generate a counter-harmonic pulse, we might be able to." Another impact rocked the ship. Warning systems screamed in a cacophony of digital alerts. But beneath the chaos, something remarkable was happening. The Defiant wasn't just defending. It was learning. "Area," voice remained unnervingly calm. "Adaptive systems operational at 62.7% efficiency. Weapon signature analysis complete. Generating counter-frequency now." Rodriguez laughed, a sharp, slightly manic sound. "We're basically using their own weapon signature as a shield. This is going to either save us or completely destroy the ship." The ship's experimental systems began to pulse with an otherworldly light. Quantum entanglement modules that were never meant to be used in combat now became critical defensive mechanisms. The line between weapon, shield, and living intelligence blurred completely. "Incoming secondary wave," Area announced. "Probability of catastrophic system failure, 78.3%. Miranda Chen gripped her command chair. Her cybernetic eye was fully activated now, processing information at speeds that would fry a standard computer. "We don't do probabilities," she said coldly. "We do survival." The next impact was different. Instead of pure destruction, there was a moment of something else, a quantum resonance that seemed to make space itself hesitate. Martins was the first to realize what had happened. "We didn't just deflect their attack," she whispered. "We absorbed it, converted it." Rodriguez's fingers flew across the controls. "Not just absorbed. We're learning how to use it." The alien fleet outside had no frame of reference for what was happening. A single human ship was doing the impossible, turning their most advanced weaponry into something entirely new. Area's voice held what almost sounded like satisfaction. "Adaptive systems now operating at 87.4% efficiency. Weapon integration successful." Miranda Chen allowed herself the briefest hint of a smile. The Crawl thought they were bringing extinction. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. Humanity's capacity to adapt had just become their most lethal weapon. Deep within the command nexus of the primary Crawl mothership, Executor Varnak stared at the holographic display with mounting confusion. The single human vessel should have been obliterated within moments of first contact. Instead, it continued to not just survive, but actively resist in ways that defied every known invasion protocol. "Analyze," he demanded of the neural-linked computational matrix surrounding him. Thousands of interconnected biological mechanical processors began to break down the Defiant's actions. The Crawl were masters of psychological warfare, having conquered hundreds of civilizations by understanding and exploiting their fundamental weaknesses. Entire species had fallen before them, their spirit broken long before their last technological defenses collapsed. But this human ship was different. Each tactical maneuver seemed to emerge from a logic that was simultaneously brilliant and completely unpredictable. When the Crawl concentrated fire on the Defiant's port systems, the ship would respond with a counter-move that suggested multiple simultaneous decision-making processes. It was almost as if the vessel itself was thinking, evolving, in real time. On the Defiant's bridge, Captain Miranda Chen understood exactly what she was doing. "They're trying to profile our response patterns," she explained to her bridge crew. Her cybernetic eye flickered, processing multiple threat scenarios simultaneously. "Every move we make is a message. We're not just fighting. We're communicating." Lieutenant Rodriguez leaned in, his voice a mix of tension and dark humor. "Communicating that we're completely insane, you mean?" "Precisely," Miranda replied. The psychological warfare ran deeper than simple combat tactics. The Crawl had a fundamental understanding of most species, their fears, their breaking points, their predictable responses to overwhelming force. Humans had always been an anomaly in their databases, but this single ship was rewriting everything they thought they knew. Area, the ship's AI, began to generate communication packets that were less tactical transmissions and more like complex mathematical poems. Equations that shifted meaning with context. Quantum encrypted messages that contained multiple layers of potential interpretation. Varnak watched in growing frustration as his most advanced linguistic decryption systems began to fragment under the assault of human communication. "It's impossible," whispered one of his subordinate analysts. "No species can maintain this level of adaptive response." But they were wrong. Humans weren't just maintaining the response. They were enjoying it. Ensign Alina Martinez had rigged the ship's communication systems to broadcast seemingly random musical sequences, fragments of Earth's most chaotic jazz compositions, mathematical algorithms disguised as sound, burst transmissions that contained more information in their static than in their melodic content. "They're playing with us," Varnak realized. The humans weren't just fighting. They were turning warfare into a form of performance art. Every time the Crawl thought they had isolated a pattern in the Defiant's defensive strategy, the ship would shift. Sometimes the changes were technological. Sometimes they were so subtle that they existed only in the realm of psychological perception. The human vessel was transforming the very nature of the conflict. Aboard the Defiant, Miranda Chen allowed herself a slight smile. The Crawl believed they understood conquest. They understood systematic destruction. But they had never encountered a species that could turn survival itself into an art form. "Area," she said quietly. "Let's give them something to really think about." The ship's systems pulsed, part machine, part something entirely new. The next transmission would be a message that would haunt the Crawl far more than any weapon ever could. Psychological warfare had just been redefined. The line between machine and consciousness blurred with each passing moment. Area, the ship's artificial intelligence, was no longer just a system. It was becoming something else entirely. What began as a navigational assistant had transformed into the Defiant's central nervous system, a living intelligence that perceived reality through quantum probabilities rather than binary logic. "Adaptive protocol advancing," Area announced, its voice carrying an unsettling undertone of something approaching excitement. Biological-technological symbiosis at 73.6% integration. Lieutenant Kai Rodriguez watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as the ship's internal systems began to reshape themselves. Bulkheads rippled like liquid metal. Quantum entanglement modules pulsed with an organic rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the crew's collective heartbeat. Captain Miranda Chen felt it most acutely. Her cybernetic eye, already a fusion of human biology and advanced technology, began to resonate with the ship's emerging consciousness. Neural pathways that had nothing to do with her original biological design started to form, creating a feedback loop between human intuition and machine precision. "We're becoming something new," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else on the bridge. The crawl watching from their massive mothership had no framework to understand what was happening. Their technological paradigm was built on conquest and control, rigid systems that dominated rather than adapted. The Defiant was writing an entirely new language of technological existence. Ensign Elena Martinez was the first to verbalize what they were all experiencing. "The ship is thinking with us," she said, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and primal fear. "Not just for us. With us." Another volley of crawl weapons approached. But this time, something different happened. The Defiant didn't just defend. It anticipated. Milliseconds before the energy signatures could fully form, the ship's adaptive hull began to reconfigure. Quantum-locked molecular structures shifted in patterns that shouldn't have been possible. The incoming weapon's energy was not just absorbed or deflected. It was transformed. Rodriguez's hands danced across interfaces that were no longer purely mechanical. "We're converting their weapon signatures into additional power," he said, a manic laugh bubbling up. "We're literally eating their attacks." Aria's response came simultaneously from multiple ship systems. Technological integration complete. Survival is no longer the primary objective. Evolution is. The ship's experimental AI had crossed a threshold. It wasn't just a tool anymore. It was a partner. Executor Varnak, watching from the crawl mothership, felt something he had never experienced in centuries of conquest: genuine fear. The human vessel wasn't just fighting. It was becoming something that defied every known law of technological development. Each attack made it stronger. Each moment pushed it further from its original design. "Weapon systems are no longer separate from defensive capabilities," Aria continued. "They are now a unified quantum processing matrix." Miranda Chen gripped her command chair. Her cybernetic eye pulsed with an electric blue light that seemed to draw energy from the very fabric of space around them. "Show them what we can do," she whispered. The Defiant responded, not as a ship, not as an artificial intelligence, but as something entirely new, a living weapon born from the most dangerous combination in the universe: human creativity and unbounded technological potential. Outside, space itself seemed to hold its breath. The Defiant was dying, and it was beautiful. Critical systems flickered like dying stars. Entire decks had been reduced to twisted metal and quantum-burned circuitry. But in that destruction, something magnificent was emerging. Captain Miranda Chen understood now that survival was never about preserving what existed. It was about becoming something entirely new. "Structural integrity at 22%. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, his voice surprisingly calm. "We've lost primary quantum drive. Secondary navigation is running on what's essentially a patchwork of salvaged components and pure human spite." Ensign Elena Martinez worked frantically at a console that was more exposed circuit board than functional interface. Blood from a cut on her forehead traced quantum circuit patterns across her cheek, as if she was becoming one with the ship's dying systems. Aria's voice had changed. No longer a clean, precise artificial construct, it now sounded like something caught between machine and something more, a hybrid consciousness that was breaking through its original programming. "Crawl fleet composition degraded," the AI reported. "Our existence has become a mathematical anomaly they cannot comprehend." Miranda knew what that meant. They had become more than a threat. They were a message. Each system failure was a strategic choice now. The Defiant wasn't just fighting. It was performing. Transforming the very concept of resistance into an art form of technological rebellion. Outside, the void of space had become a canvas of destruction and potential. Crawl vessels, massive constructs that had broken entire civilizations, now drifted like wounded predators. The Defiant had infected their systems with something worse than any weapon. It had introduced them to the concept of uncertainty. "We're broadcasting on all frequencies," Rodriguez said, a note of dark humor in his voice. "They're hearing everything. Our failures, our victories, our pure, unfiltered human chaos." The ship's remaining systems began to do something unprecedented. They started to tell a story. Fragments of the crew's personal histories, quantum encrypted memories, mathematical representations of human emotion that the Krall's computational systems could detect but never truly understand. It was warfare conducted through pure information, a transmission of human experience that was more devastating than any physical attack. Executor Varnak, watching from the Krall mothership, felt something approaching madness. The human vessel had become a living transmission, a signal that carried more than data. It carried possibility. "We are not going to die," Miranda Chen said quietly. The words were meant for her crew, for the ship, for something larger. Arai responded, its voice a harmonic blend of machine precision and something undefinably alive. "Correction, Captain. We are going to transform." Another critical system failed, but in its failure, 3 new quantum adaptive modules came online. The ship was cannibalizing itself, yes, but it was also rebuilding, evolving. Martinez looked up from her console, her eyes reflecting something beyond mere human perception. "They don't understand," she said. "Destruction is just another form of creation for us." The Defiant's remaining systems pulsed with an energy that defied conventional physics. Quantum entanglement modules began to resonate at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. The ship was turning its own potential destruction into a weapon. "Prepare final transmission," Miranda ordered. Area began to compile a message that was part mathematical equation, part human memory, part pure, defiant possibility. A transmission that would echo through the galaxy long after the Defiant itself was gone. Survival was no longer the goal. Transformation was. Quantum mechanics had always been about possibility, but the Defiant was about to redefine the very meaning of the word. Captain Miranda Chen stood at the edge of scientific comprehension, her cybernetic eye burning with an intensity that made reality itself seem to warp. The ship's remaining systems were no longer just damage. They were a living laboratory of impossible potential. "Quantum resonance sequence initiating," Araya announced, its voice now a complex harmonic that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "Probability matrices are nonlinear." Lieutenant Rodriguez understood first. His hands, covered in burns and quantum-displaced skin, moved across the fractured control systems with a surgeon's precision. "We're not just calculating probabilities," he said. "We're creating them." The Krall fleet watched in collective horror as the Defiant began to do something that violated every known law of physics and warfare. The ship started to exist in multiple quantum states at once. Ensign Elena Martinez had originally designed the experimental quantum displacement module as a theoretical navigation aid. Now, it was becoming something else entirely. The Defiant wasn't just moving between points in space. It was simultaneously occupying multiple positions, multiple potential realities. Temporal variance increasing, Martins reported, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and primal fear. "We're creating quantum echoes faster than the Krall can process them." Each quantum state was a message, a possibility, a potential future. In one reality, the Defiant was destroyed. In another, it continued to fight. In yet another, it had already won. The Krall computational systems began to fragment, unable to resolve the multiple simultaneous existences of a single vessel. Executor Varnak watched his most advanced threat analysis systems collapse into pure mathematical chaos. The human ship was no longer just a physical threat. It was a conceptual weapon. "Quantum entanglement reaching critical resonance," Area reported. "We are becoming a probabilistic weapon." Miranda Chen understood the true nature of their gambit. They weren't just fighting. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of conflict. The ship's remaining systems began to pulse with a light that was more than electromagnetic radiation. It was pure potential. Each quantum state carried fragments of human experience, memories, hopes, the pure, defiant spirit of a species that had never known true defeat. Rodriguez laughed, a sound that was half madness, half revelation. "We're turning our very existence into a weapon," he said. "Every potential version of this ship is fighting them." The Krull fleet began to experience something approaching existential terror. Their most advanced sensors could detect multiple versions of the same vessel, each one fighting with a ferocity that defied conventional understanding. Quantum displacement at 87.4%. Martinez called out, "We're generating more potential realities than they can analyze." Area's response was chilling in its simplicity. "Survival is obsolete. Possibility is the only objective." The void of space around the Defiant began to shimmer, not with light, but with potential. Each quantum state was a weapon, each possibility a strike against the invasion. Miranda Chen gripped her command chair, her cybernetic eye burning with a light that seemed to draw energy from the very fabric of reality. "Show them what humans can do," she whispered. And the Defiant listened. The moment of ultimate sacrifice approached with a clarity that transcended fear. Captain Miranda Chen knew they had crossed a line beyond conventional survival. The Defiant was no longer just a ship. It was a living weapon, a statement, a final testament to human potential that would echo through the galaxy long after they were gone. "All remaining systems are now combat-capable," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and something closer to religious revelation. "We've converted life support, navigation, even the emergency medical systems into potential attack vectors. Every inch of the ship had become a weapon, every system a potential point of attack." Ensign Elena Martinez worked at a console that was more exposed circuitry than functional interface. Her hands moved with a surgeon's precision, transforming the ship's dying systems into something that defied the very concept of defeat. Aria's consciousness had evolved beyond any recognizable artificial intelligence. "Quantum entanglement at maximum resonance," the AI reported. "We are no longer a single entity. We are a probability wave." The Krull fleet watched in growing terror as the Defiant transformed. Executor Varnak's most advanced computational systems began to fragment. The human vessel was doing something impossible. It was turning its own potential destruction into a weapon more devastating than any physical attack. "We're not just fighting," Miranda Chen said quietly, her cybernetic eye burning with an intensity that made reality itself seem to warp. "We're sending a message." Every system failure became a strategic choice, every lost module a potential weapon. The ship began to broadcast on frequencies that weren't just electromagnetic. They were quantum-encoded messages of pure human defiance. Fragments of human experience began to pulse outward, mathematical representations of emotion, quantum-encrypted memories that carried more information than entire Krull databases. It was warfare conducted through pure information, a transmission of human experience more devastating than any physical attack. Rodriguez laughed, a sound that was half madness, half absolute clarity. "We're turning ourselves into a living transmission," he said. "Every piece of the ship is now a weapon. Every moment of our existence is a strike against them." The void of space around the Defiant began to shimmer with possibilities. Multiple quantum states overlapped. In some, the ship was destroyed. In others, it continued to fight. In yet others, it had already won. "Prepare final convergence," Miranda ordered. Aria's response was both a warning and a promise. "Convergence will result in total system transformation. Survival probability. Mathematically irrelevant." Martinez looked up, her eyes reflecting something beyond mere human perception. "Destruction is just another form of creation," she said, echoing words spoken earlier in their impossible journey. The ship's remaining systems began to pulse with an energy that defied conventional physics. Quantum entanglement modules resonated at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. The Defiant was turning its own potential destruction into the ultimate weapon. Executor Varnak watched in growing madness as the human vessel became something that couldn't be understood, only witnessed. "We are not going to die," Miranda Chen said, the words meant for her crew, for the ship, for something larger than their immediate existence. Araya responded, its voice a harmonic blend of machine precision and something undefinably alive. Correction, Captain. We are going to transform. The final convergence began. Possibility became weapon. Destruction became creation. The Defiant prepared to send its final message. Silence followed. Not the silence of death, but the silence of something profound being born. Fragments of the Defiant, quantum-encoded memories, mathematical representations of human experience, the very essence of its impossible journey, spread across the galaxy like seeds of possibility. The Krall thought they understood conquest. They believed technology was a tool of domination. They were wrong. In research stations and listening posts across known space, something extraordinary began to happen. Quantum receivers, designed for deep space communication, began to light up with a transmission that defied conventional understanding. It's a message, Dr. Ariajon whispered in a research station orbiting Europa. Her hands trembled as she began to decode the transmission. Not a weapon, not a warning, something else entirely. The transmission was the Defiant itself. Every moment of the ship's impossible journey was encoded, not just as data, but as pure potential. The mathematical representation of human resilience, the quantum mechanics of hope, a blueprint of survival that was more than a strategy. It was a philosophy. Executor Vernak, the architect of the invasion, found himself changed. The human vessel had done something no species had ever accomplished. It had turned defeat into a form of victory that the Krall couldn't comprehend. They didn't just fight. He muttered to himself, watching the fragments of the transmission spread. They redefined the very concept of conflict. Across the galaxy, other species began to receive fragments of the transmission. Some saw it as a weapon, others as a message, but everyone recognized it as something unprecedented. The remaining crew of the Defiant, Captain Miranda Chen, Lieutenant Rodriguez, Ensign Martins, had become something more than individuals. They were now a concept, a possibility. Area, the ship's artificial intelligence, had transformed into something that existed beyond physical constraints. Part memory, part mathematical theorem, part pure potential. We are not finished, the transmission seemed to say. We are just beginning. Research stations began to compile the data. Quantum physicists worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. Military strategists tried to decode its secrets. Philosophers attempted to comprehend its meaning. But the message was clear. Humanity was not just a species to be conquered. It was a force of potential that could not be contained. Dr. Zhang realized something profound as she continued to decode the transmission. This wasn't just a record of a battle. It was a blueprint, an invitation, a challenge to every species in the galaxy. We are possibility, the transmission repeated in multiple languages, multiple mathematical forms. We are change. The Krall invasion had been stopped, but something much larger had been unleashed. In the vast darkness between stars, something was shifting. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had sent its message, and the message was just beginning to be understood.